I just got back from a month in Jerusalem, and so when Rabbi Tower called and asked me to give him a title for today, I was like, well, I don't know. And then I thought to myself, I'm going to title it All Roads Lead to Jerusalem, because fascinatingly enough, every time I go, it seems like there's another major road coming into Jerusalem. And as I had a meeting actually with Machon Lev, they were explaining to me how there's this other major road that's going to be built coming into Yerushalayim right by Givat Mordechai. So everybody in this room is very young, but I remember, and my husband and I discussed it very often, that there used to be a lot of traffic in Yerushalayim. You know, if you came to Yerushalayim and it was after 6 o'clock in the morning, you couldn't get it took you 2 hours to get from one end of the town to the other. And now there's zero traffic on Rehov Yafo because you can't drive on Rehov Yafo. But that has had implications everywhere. And with all the events that have happened over the past several days, so I think it's all of our tefillah and all of our, I don't know why like every time there's a mic I get twisted to it. But over the course of the past several days, with all of the events that have been going down, that it's our hope that Yerushalayim will continue to be built and will continue to go from strength to strength. So when I was thinking about what I could possibly say here today, I was thinking about this class that I took several years ago by Rav Henkin Alav Hashalom. And he talked about the very famous story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. Okay, most people here know about the story of Kamsa Bar Kamsa. It's what we're going to do last. I have 32 minutes. I was going to use this, but Rabbi put it in there for me, so that's great. But in reality, it's not the only story about the destruction of the temple. The rabbis bring down several other sources about why the temple was destroyed. And sometimes they don't even clarify specifically which temple it is, and they leave it to our imagination. So I thought what we do is we take 3 different sources about why the temple was destroyed. The Kamsa Bar Kamsa story is going to be last. And we're going to talk about what happened, what did we do that was so bad that Hashem destroyed his house, right? And as Miriam actually said before, like it's kind of his house instead of destroying us, which is very wonderful. But here we go. We're going to do it. I'm going to read it slowly, and then you're going to tell me what jumps out at you from this source. Okay, so this is the first one. It's in Masechet Yomah. It says, Mikdash Rishon Mipnei Machara. What's the reason why the first Beit HaMikdash was destroyed? Mipnei Shelosha Devarim Shayu Ba. There were 3 major sins that were taking place during the Second Temple: Avodah Zarah, idolatry, Gilui Arayot, promiscuousness, and Shpichut Damim, which is murder. Great, and then they bring a whole bunch of psukim down. I'm not going to go through all the psukim because I want to get to what comes at the end. Aval mikdash sheni shehayu oskin b'torah u'mitzvot u'gmilut chasadim. But what about the second Beit HaMikdash? They were fulfilling the mitzvot of the Torah. They were doing gmilut chasadim. Why was that destroyed? It's funny to me. It stuck out, right? They're doing gmilut chasadim. How come it was destroyed from? Sinat Chinam. They don't seem to go together. Gmilut Chasadim and Sinat Chinam, they kind of seem opposite of each other, right? On the one side, you can have Gmilut Chasadim. On the other side, you can have Sinat Chinam. How do you have it together? I don't know. Okay, so here we go. So what does it say? So why was it destroyed? Mipnei shehayta bo Sinat Chinam. Lilamdecha, to teach us, sheshkula Sinat Chinam kineged shalosh averot. That Sinat Chinam is equal to the 3 major averot of Shvichut Damim, Gilui Arayot, and Avodah Zarah. Okay, that's pretty bad. So here we go here. Risha'im hayu, they were evil. Doesn't say now which Beit HaMikdash it's talking about. It says Risha'im hayu, ela shetalu bitchonam b'hakadosh baruch hu. They were evil, but they hung their hat on that Hashem was going to save them. It's also kind of a funny concept, right? What could that mean? So hold on, because thought Rashi would say something, but he doesn't, but other people does. Ata'an l'mikdash rishon. So let's go back to the mikdash rishon, the Gemara says. Right? It says, Dichtiv Rasha b'shochad yishpotu, that the heads were judging with bribery, the Kohaneh b'mechir yaru, and the Kohanim were charging extra for the services that they were performing. BeAb b'kesef yiksomo, and the prophets were prophesizing for money. V'al Hashem yisha'enu. So we're talking about the Beit HaMikdash Harishon. That's the pasuk, that they were evil, but they believed that Hashem was among them. Lemor, halo Hashem b'kirbenu, lo tavo aleinu ra'ah. Nothing bad is going to happen to us because Hashem dwells among us. Right, so I read the pasuk, Eres she'inei Hashem ba mereshit shana ad acharit hashana, and I get nervous, right? That means he's watching everything, he's seeing everything. They're taking the pasuk, Eres she'inei Hashem ba, as this is great, he's here, nothing's going to happen to us, he picked us, he built his house, the fire comes down from Shamayim to take our korbanot, we have, the red string turns to white string on Yom Kippur, Hashem is here, nothing's going to happen to us, we're good, Says yes, we're good. Okay. And so, like every good parent, Hashem has to teach us that just because you live in my, it's my rules, my house, you don't live by my rules in my house, so you're going to find another place to live. Literally. Right? So then he destroys the Beit HaMikdash, he makes Yerushalayim into... he destroys Yerushalayim also, which is so interesting. For the first time this year, as I was reading through these things, there seems to be a differentiation between Yerushalayim and the Mikdash. They're two separate geulot, two separate binyans, two separate buildings, right? So, great. So we have the three averot, we have three punishments that Hashem brought. V'chen biglalchem, Tzion sadeh techaresh. They're gonna be plowed, Zion will be plowed over, Yerushalayim iyim tihiyah, it's gonna be little chopped up, v'har habayit lebamot ya'ir, and we're not gonna have the Beit HaMikdash anymore. And that's where it stops, that's the punishment, that's by Rishon. And then the Gemara asks, B'mikdash Rishon, because we need to know more, right? B'mikdash Rishon la hava be'sinat chinam. Wasn't there sinat chinam also in the Beit HaMikdash Harishon? So we think yes, you think no?
No.
So there's a pasuk actually that says, Migurei el cherev hayu et ami, v'chen sfok el yarech. So it's from Yechezkel. Apparently there was some sinat chinam in the Beit HaMikdash Harishon also. It's hard to get away from it, I have to like everybody for sinat, There was somebody who said, and my husband was reading something to me last night, and he said that, when you like Bnei Israel because they do chesed, so you're ohavei chesed. When you like Talmidei Chachamim, you're ohavei Torah. When you like people who give tzedakah, you're ohavei tzedakah. And when you like Jews, when they don't do any of those, then you're an ohev Yisrael. Right? So it's not so easy to be an ohev Yisrael, but interestingly enough, Rabbi Eliezer says, what does it mean when there was sinat chinam there? Elu b'nei adam she'ochlim v'shotim zeh zeh. They sat, they had dinner, they had lunch, they got together, they're interacting with each other. V'toklin zeh zeh v'charavot bilshonam. They're sarcastic, right? They digged each other, right? They sat, they ate lunch, they ate dinner, they went to parties together. They're sarcastic, and they're digging each other as they're sitting and enjoying each other's company, so to speak, or as they're going to the parties together. But the Gemara clarifies, but you should know, Hahi b'nesi'ei Yisrael. That was just with the princes of Israel. It wasn't with the group. So I'll ask you this now. You heard Yair Lapid, he said something recently about the Knesset? Yes, he said that how the Knesset goes, the rest of the Jewish people go. So the Knesset's not like the Jewish people in the land of Israel right now. They get along with each other. They mostly like each other. What happens when the Knesset is jibing each other, and they're mean to each other, and they're undermining each other, and they interrupt each other, and they can't listen to each other, and they can't work together, and they can't come to conclusions together? That trickles down to the rest of the people. But Gemara here says it's opposite. Here, the Jewish people got along well together, and it was just the princes, just the officers of the people that didn't get along with Sinat Chinam, and that's why Sinat Chinam is not one of the reasons why the first temple was destroyed. Only the second temple. Okay, great. So now the Gemara wants to know. So who's worse? Was the first temple worse or the second temple worse? Was Shlichut Damim, Gilui Arayot, and Avodah Zarah worse, or was Sinat Chinam worse? So what do you think?
The first one.
Tell me why.
Because you have Ben Adam L'Chavero and Ben Adam L'Makom. If you had Shlichut Damim and Gilui Arayot, you had Sinat Chinam. Like it's...
So you have both. The first temple, you had Ben Adam L'Makom and Ben Adam L'Chavero. So that one has to be worse because the second temple was just Ben Adam L'Chavero. Anybody else? Yeah.
The second one's worse because the first one it took 70 years to rebuild, and this one is 2,000 plus years later, and it's still not rebuilt.
Nice. So you're saying, look at the end, right? One temple got rebuilt, the other one did not. So therefore, the first temple is better than the second temple because there was a remedy to that. Go ahead.
Also, I feel like the second's worse because an issue with Ben Adam L'Chavero also shows like you lack Ben Adam L'Makom, but like an issue with Ben Adam L'Makom, it's just left to that.
Very nice. So Celia is adding that when you have problems with Ben Adam L'Chavero, it's a deeper problem with Ben Adam L'Makom because you haven't recognized that, right? Am I saying, right?
Yeah.
That it's not getting, when it's Ben Adam L'Makom, it's Ben Adam L'Makom, and it's like you had a fight just with Hashem, or you have an issue with Hashem, you're not understanding Hashem. But here with Ben Adam L'Chavero, there's a chisaron in our Ben Adam L'Makom because we haven't integrated it with our Ben Adam L'Chavero. Monique, you wanted to
So
say?
in reading last night and also now, I don't understand the delineation personally. I agree with Raquel. Those three sins encompass the whole Sinat Chinam. If you hate people, you kill them. You don't love them enough. You don't recognize their same, their, as Rabbi Lepton say, Zelen Elohim. If you're sleeping with other people's spouses, you don't respect their relationships. And Gilui Arayot, I guess that's the only one that I would say. I
No,
don't
that's
think
right.
it's going
That's
along.
if you're sleeping with other
Sorry,
people's
sorry,
wives,
I
you
meant
did. So the
Avodah
Avodah
Zarah.
Zarah.
Avodah Zarah. But Avodah Zarah, actually, you could say it's just people going with the crowd. They're all doing the same thing. Nobody has the individuality to think on his own. So I think they all encompass it. It's like,
Right, so you're saying it's both.
Yeah.
So then you're gonna agree that the first temple is worse because
It encompasses all the...
it's both and it's bolit, right? It looks like it's all there in society. Okay, anybody else? So the Gemara is a little give and take also, right? It's not a crazy thing. Listen to what they say. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar Da'amre Talbayu, two of the Amoraim, say as follows: Rishonim are better. Why were the Rishonim better, even though their sins seem to be very deep? Shenitkala avonam, nitkala kitzam. Because whatever they did publicly, that everybody knew what their sin was. So therefore, the end of their punishment was also clear. Right? So, how can I say it? It's like, they have a deal, right? The kid in class who's cheating, and the teacher sees the kid cheating. So there you go, there's a 0 on the paper, and that's it. That was your punishment, and you moved on from there. But sometimes there's a kid, and he's kind of like, causing lots of trouble, but he's never the one that gets caught. And he just keeps doing it, and then the teacher kind of knows, and it's bothering, and then the whole class winds up getting punished because you can't figure out who's really responsible for what it is, and there's a consequence for the whole class because this guy who's being, who's inciting everybody else to do something wrong. So there's no clear punishment there. There's a consequence. And says the Gemara, there's a difference between, or I'm reading into it a little bit maybe, there's a difference between a punishment and a consequence. Punishment, you got a punishment. You got to go to your room for the next 2 hours, no TV, no cell phone, no internet. Sit there for 2 hours, I'll call you when dinner's ready, right? That's punishment, mommy punished you. But then there's the consequence, where mommy's watching you, let's say, on your cell phone, and you didn't do your homework, and you didn't study, and she knows there's a test, but she's been after you for weeks already, and she's had it, and she's like, okay, So now you'll have a consequence, and maybe you're not going to do as well on this test, and you won't do as well on the next test, and you won't do as well on the test after that, and then you'll forget to give in that assignment, and you'll be late to this, and you'll be late to that, and now you're not accepted to college. Right? It's a consequence. So which is worse, the punishment or the consequence? Because I have punishment, I have a beginning and an end to a punishment, and I have a consequence. The person who would usually punish you is removing themselves from the situation and is allowing you to experience the consequence. Which one is possibly easier to overcome? The punishment, because I took the punishment, I understood the punishment, I felt the punishment, I know what it's for, I know what I have to fix. But when I have a consequence, I don't always know where my consequence came from. So I'll blame it, teacher didn't write on the, website what the test was on. Or I forgot because she didn't announce it in class. And she only put it on the website, so I forgot. It's not my fault, right? Sometimes with a consequence, we all have this mechanism to say, but it's not really my fault. There's also other things that cause this consequence to happen. So says the Gemara, he says, Rabbi Yochanan says, Tovat Tzipornan Shel Rishonim. The fingernails of the people from the first Beit HaMikdash are better. Mikreso Shel Acharonim. From the heads of the people of the second temple period. Right? Their fingernails, which you cut off, right, and you dispose of, were better than the heads of the people from the second temple. And why? The end line here is Tinu Enechem Babira. Just look at the capital city. Which one was rebuilt? Who said it? Somebody said it here. Yes? Somebody said it. Who said it? Celia said it. Sylvia said it? Sylvia said it. That just take a look. Which one got rebuilt and which one didn't get rebuilt? So and there your answer is. Okay. So that's one. We have punishment versus consequence, doing something out in the open versus doing something kind of underhanded, right? Or not underhanded, but secretly. And then we have another Gemara before we get to the Kamsa Bar Kamsa story. So here we go. This is a great one also, and it's not clear which Beit HaMikdash we're talking about here. Some Mefarshim say first temple, some people say second temple, but I'm going to read it to you anyways. I don't think that this is so commonly talked about. So why was the Beit HaMikdash destroyed? You're going to have 7 reasons, guys. Okay? Ready? Lo charva, Rav Avahu says, Lo charva Yerushalayim ela bishvil shebitlu kiriyat shema shacharit ve'arbit. Why? Tell me your name. Lydia. Oh, okay. So Lydia, how come the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed?
So the first one is that it was because of the people that were.
No, this one, this sentence. Ready? I'm going to say it again. Lo charva Yerushalayim ela bishvil shebitlu kiryat shema shacharit ve'arbit. Yeah, you heard that before? Never heard that before. Okay, here we go again. Rav Himnuna says, Lo charva Yerushalayim ela bishvil shebitlu ba tinokot shel bet Rabban. What does that mean, Michelle? Yeah, tinokot shel bet Rabban. It's a phrase. Anybody familiar with the phrase, tinokot shel bet Rabban? No, those are the little kids who are learning the alphabet. When they go to school and somebody teaches them Aleph Bet and they teach them how to read. So what's he saying, Rav Himnuna? Shebitlu ba tinokot shel bet Rabban. So if I take that a little further, why is the Beit HaMikdash destroyed? What are people not doing? They're not learning. They're not teaching the little kids. If you're not teaching the little kids, then what's going to be 20 years from now, right? So we have no Kiryat Shema. We have no Tinokot shel bet Rabban. Good. Next one. Lo charva Yerushalayim ela b'mpnei shelo haya lahem boshet panim ze mizeh. What do you say?
I'm not sure what boshet panim is, but relating to each other in a good way.
Yeah. They had no humility when they were talking to each other. Lo haya lahem boshet panim ze mizeh. They had no. They were. It's arrogance. They were arrogant in the way they related with each other. Good. Lo charva Yerushalayim ela b'shvil shushvu katan vegadol. Hushvu.
Swearing.
Oh, so good, sorry. It's my fault because I have the text and you don't. Shin vav vav, from the word shaveh, right?
Like you weren't.
They made them equal. A big guy in society and a little guy in society, and they made them equal. I don't think they mean height and size. I think they mean, the guy, it's almost like, if you'll take it the way the head of the neonatal unit was equated with the intern who just started his career in terms of asking what they should do for the baby in the neonatal unit, right? So they equated young and old, let's say. לא חרבה ירושלים אלא בשביל שלא הוכיחו זה את זה. That's a hard one, הוכיחו. Yeah, they didn't rebuke each other. They're like, live and let live. What do I care? You don't want to be Shomer Shabbat, you won't be Shomer Shabbat. I'm Shomer Shabbat. You wanna not give tzedakah? Okay, you won't give tzedakah. What am I going to do for you? I'm going to give tzedakah, but I'm not going to worry about you. לא חרבה ירושלים אלא בשביל שביזו תלמידי חכמים.
They made fun of students.
They made fun of people who were learning, people who were learned, who cared about their learning. They made fun of them. What are they wasting their time for? And then the last one on this list over here, לא חרבה ירושלים אלא בשביל שפסקו ממנו אנשי אמנה. Amana, Aleph Mem Nun Hey. It's a hard one. Yes, people who were, right, but not just emunah in terms of how they related to Hashem, but also emunah in terms of how they,
Loyalty, emun.
Yeah, loyalty, emun, and also, and think also, nasato be'emunah, masa matan be'emunah, like trustworthy.
Right.
There were no trustworthy people left in Yerushalayim. So those are all 7. How many of us heard all those 7 before? No, not really, right? So, but it's an interesting way that the Gemara writes it, right? Because in the other Gemara it said, why was the temple destroyed? Mipnei shalosh adivarim elam, mipnei sinat chinam. From this reason, the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. Here, it's saying, lo charva Yerushalayim ela b'shvil. There's a little bit of a difference there, right? So let's sit with it for a little bit. I took a class once with Simi Peter. She said with Midrash, what you have to do is you have to read it slowly, and you have to think about it, because every word makes a difference, right? So, lo charva Yerushalayim ela bishvil.
So it's like, if any one of those weren't the case, it would have been saved.
Yeah.
You have to have all 7, but one of them could have saved the whole thing.
Yeah, had this thing been happening at the time when the temple was destroyed, so it would have tipped the scale. It would have made things different.
It sounds interesting. From those 7, a lot of them seem to be today in this country, like with the new thing, whatever. It just has a lot of parallel. People don't respect experts. Experts. Who cares about the experts? We want to hear about like it's just.
Everybody's opinion is equal. Everybody's opinion is valid. There's no respect for, and you don't trust. Who trusts anybody anymore, right? Look at it's really scary.
Except for the Kiryat Shema part, I think all the other 6 really sound like, America today.
Yeah, look what's happening. People could talk about what's happening in education. Which is, to Miriam's point, for those of you who were there before, every generation where the temple isn't rebuilt, it's like the temple was destroyed in their generation. So here we are, when we're on a and this is where the Kamsa Bar Kamsa story is going to come into play. If you're on this seesaw, you're on this scale, right? And there's stuff on the scale that's tipping it towards destruction. When you're not careful with those, so then the scale is tipped. It's very heavy what you have, but had you had all these, and this is sometimes I think what we all miss, it's a lot of the little things always that make so much of the difference, right? How we conduct ourselves day to day, how we interact day to day, what we respect day to day, what we think is trustworthy, what we think is loyalty, what we think shows belief, right? And I think that, by the way, Kriyat Shema kind of grounds us. I would have to say it in the morning and at night, that to remind us about what we're supposed to be doing throughout the day. Okay, I want to say
So
something.
whenever we talk about Sinat Chinam and BeAb, we never talk about the actual history of what happened with it actual infighting between the different groups of Jews.
Mhm.
We always take it back to a very personal level of how we behave amongst ourselves, and I feel like we miss something when we don't realize that groups of people, of Jews, were disagreeing and setting themselves up for failure.
Yeah, and disagreeing to the point where they were willing to sell the other one down the river, or to force that other side into doing what they wanted them to do, right? It was a very, very intense, I'm right, you're wrong, you have to do it my way, and I'm gonna make sure that you do it my way, right? Like the people who stood, there were 2 rings when, during the Second Temple period, right? Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai had to, get out, they took his coffin out of Yerushalayim, if you remember the story. So it wasn't just the Romans that wanted to make sure he was dead. There were Jews who were standing around the gates of Yerushalayim, making sure that nobody left Yerushalayim, and that wanted to stick a sword through the rabbi's coffin to make sure he was really dead and not trying to escape. So that concept of, and I think that's where we're going to come to right now with the Kamsa Bar Kamsa story, because there's a piece in the Kamsa Bar Kamsa story that I don't think everybody, or at least, I don't know, when I hear the story quite often, I don't hear that. Uh-oh. Sorry guys, 1 second. Where's my, here it is, thank God. Okay. So in the beginning of the Kamsa Bar Kamsa story, so it's talking about the situation when Yerushalayim was destroyed. The story doesn't start with, let me tell you why the temple was destroyed. The story starts with as follows. Rabbi Yochanan asks, what does it mean? And this, you'll keep it in your head, guys, and we'll talk about it afterwards. What does it mean? Ashrei Adam mepached tamid umakshe libo yipol bera'ah. Happy is the man who fears always, but he who hardens his heart will fall into evil. Right? That's the pasuk. It's from Mishlei. Happy is the person who's always afraid, and the guy whose heart is strong, he's gonna wind up falling. So it says it's about the Kamsa Bar Kamsa story. That's how the story comes out. So it's talking about Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. So we're gonna point out just a few things along the way. Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, how do they know each other?
They don't like each other.
So the guy who's so they don't like each other.
Oh no, that's.
Well, one gets invited and one doesn't get invited. But Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, what does Bar mean? Son. The son. There's Kamsa and there's the son of Kamsa. So we have here an intergenerational split. There's the father and the son. They're not getting along with each other. They operate in different circles. They don't communicate with each other or something. Okay, so what happens here? Kamsa and Bar Kamsa and Chiruv Yerushalayim. All of this, I can show it to you. This pasuk in the Kamsa and Bar Kamsa story. So here we go. We know the story. Yeah, you with me? We're good? You want to say something? You sure? Okay. All right. So I for this part, I'm going to read a little bit in English, right? So there was this place. Jerusalem was destroyed. Oh, let's start from here. On the account of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. So what happened? There was a guy, and his friend was named Kamsa, and his enemy was Bar Kamsa. So some guy liked the father, didn't like the son. Yeah? Great. He once made a large feast, and he said to his servant, go get Kamsa, my good friend. The servant went and mistakenly brought him his enemy, Bar Kamsa. The man who was hosting the feast came. He found Bar Kamsa sitting there, and he said, you went to Bar Kamsa. So this guy is my enemy. What are you doing here? He says to Bar Kamsa. Get up and leave. Bar Kamsa says, listen, I came, let me stay. I'll pay you for whatever I eat and drink. He says, no, you gotta go. Bar Kamsa says, I'll give you money for half the feast. Just don't send me away. He says, no, you have to go. I'll pay for the whole thing. No, you have to go. Finally, Bar Kamsa finally the host took Bar Kamsa by his hand, stood him up, took him out, and after he left, Bar Kamsa said to himself, there were some rabbis there. And they didn't say anything about the fact that I was being thrown out, and they saw how I was humiliated. So therefore, I'm gonna go tell on them. So he goes to tell on them. He went to the emperor, and he says, the Jews are planning to rebel against you. Not necessarily an untruth, right? The Jews were not happy, and the Jews wanted to rebel. So the emperor says to him, How do you say that? So Bar Kamsa says, go test them, you'll see. Send them an offering, and you'll see. If they sacrifice it, there's no rebellion. If they don't sacrifice it, there's a rebellion. So he sends a beautiful 3-year-old calf, no problems with it, and he sends it with Bar Kamsa. And Bar Kamsa, of course, nicks the 3-year-old calf and brings it to the temple. And then it's fascinating what's happening here, right? So it's really not nice. The whole story is just a terrible story. But okay, he brings the animal, and the sages, now they have to figure out what to do. The rabbis have to figure out what to do. So the sages said, let's sacrifice it.
This is exactly what you said in the first story, the consequences, because it's causing trouble.
And the teacher or the parent's going to let him deal with the consequences. So the sages, good. So that's a double level of consequences. So here we go. The rabbis say, let's sacrifice it. We have to maintain peace with the government. Things are very tense right now. It's going to be bad if we don't sacrifice it. Let's sacrifice it. And then Rav Zachariah ben Avkilus, he says, no, we can't do that, because then people will say, if you send an animal that has a blemish, that it's okay and you can sacrifice it. So the sages say, okay, well then if we don't sacrifice it, we have to stop Bar Kamsa from going back and telling the emperor, right? Because he's going to go back and tell them. So he said, let's kill Bar Kamsa, right? So Rav Zachariah once again says, no, you can't kill him, because if you kill him, then the people will think if they brought an animal with a blemish, then that's worthy of the death penalty. And that would be bad. The people will learn the wrong thing. So as a result, they did nothing. And he went back and he told the emperor that they were planning on rebelling, and the emperor believed them, and so began the great revolt. And what does the Gemara says? And Rabbi Yochanan says it. It's a great line. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, in vatnuto shel Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulus, hecheriva et beitenu v'sarfat hechalenu v'heglitanu me'artzenu. That the anvatnuto, what is that?
Which was too humble.
Yeah, the humbleness of Rav Zachariah ben Avkilus is what did us all in. So first of all, it's fascinating. Poor Rav Zachariah ben Avkilus, he's trying to say what the halacha is, right? So I think it points to a lot of things, and I have 1 minute and 30 seconds, so I'm going to try and do it in 1 minute and 30 seconds. Number one, I don't know, all the sages, playing with this in my head, all the sages were saying either to sacrifice it or to kill Bar Kamsa. And Zachariah ben Avkilus is like, no, you can't do that, and you can't do that, and they all listen to him. So how's that humility? Doesn't seem like so much humility to me. It means he stood up for what he thought was right, and he didn't let them do what they wanted to do. That's number one. Number two, that was my big one. And anyway, and he's blaming, Rabbi Yochanan is now blaming Rav Zachariah ben Avkilus.
For the great revolt,
Yeah, if it wasn't for him, then it wouldn't have happened. So it takes you back to the pasuk. They're not going to give me the extra 10 minutes. Ashrei Adam Mefached Tamid. So what's the story here? Ashrei Adam Mefached Tamid was, you could say, Rav Zachariah ben Avkilus, but perhaps he had to be afraid in another way, which I think, Raquel, is what you were saying before. So the Malbim says that there's a difference between Pachad and Mefached. There's a Binyan Kal and the Binyan, it says here, HaKaved, right? So when there's Pachad, so you have something that you're afraid of. When you're Mefached, he says, Diber davar she'en sham pachad. Rak hu oseh et atzmo mifached. He makes himself afraid. Okay, so I'm going to skip here. It goes like this. That when we conduct ourselves, I think, and that this would go in the political arena, it's going to go off in a second anyway. I think so. I don't know. When we conduct ourselves, right? So Ashrei Adam Mefached Tamid. So I think that the lesson for us in the public arena and then in our private arena as well is that if we can conduct ourselves in a way that's Mefached Tamid, that we're always considering what the consequences are going to be, then perhaps then it'll be Ashrei Adam in that way instead of Makshe Libo. Because when I'm so sure that I'm right, and I'm so sure that everybody has to follow my way, then I'm not willing to listen to the other person, then I'm not willing to bring them along with me, then I'll be Shomer Shabbat, but I don't care if they're Shomer Shabbat. But if I'm mifached tamid, if I'm always concerned about the other, and I'm always concerned about whether or not I'm making the right decision, and I'm always concerned if I'm teaching something in the right way, the chances of consequence are less. And what we, I think, know really about the Second Temple period is that Hashem allowed us to live with our consequences. And the only way for us to be mitgaber on those consequences, to overcome those consequences, is to be mefached tamid, to always consider what might the consequences be for the thing that I'm going to do, and how can I ensure that the consequences will be l'tovah and not l'ra'ah. And Be'ezrat Hashem, Hashem will continue to be Bonei Yerushalayim. He will bring us back home. I heard 1,000 people went up to Har HaBayit. It's a funny place, Israel. You travel for an hour and it's a whole different scenario. So while our soldiers are defending us on the Gaza Strip, we are also being Olel Har HaBayit. So we should be Zoched, that we should be Olel Har HaBayit, Bli any bayot, that it should be b'sheket, b'shalva, b'shalom, v'shekulanu nizkeh, that we should all merit.